How many of us have gotten to the point in life where we realize that God knows just so much more than we do? He's way smarter than we are. He knows the future, things that we can never see. In fact, isn't it true that so many people end up doing things in life that they never would have expected, never would have planned? And yet somehow in the midst of all of that, God manages to take all the things that we did, the experiences leading up to it, and just put it all together and make us who we are today. That's going to be the subject of what we're going to talk about, a life that never would have been planned by us, but was planned by God the whole time. That's the subject of today's episode of the Audacious Faith Podcast. If there's one thing we've learned in life, is that God seems to have an incredible sense of humor. How many people go to college, schooling, specialized training, you name it, and then hardly use what they prepared for at all? And yet he takes those skills, puts them in a totally different area, and they are extremely effective. Almost makes us think that possibly he knew all along what he was doing. In fact, we know that to be true. My guest today is a perfect example of that. Someone who's doing great things, making a huge impact, extremely talented, and definitely one of the most unique people that I know, and you're going to see why as we go through the interview. So I'm so happy to have her with me, and that's Miss Francine Morales. Good to have you, Francine.
Great to be here.
So we're going to go ahead and just kind of, I know a lot of people that are watching this probably already know you, but we're going to, have people get to know you a little bit better. So why don't we start off with what I do with most people? Give us a little bit of your background, story of faith, maybe how you got to, be to the point of what you're doing today, all those type of things.
I grew up going to a Christian school, a private school. Mm-hmm. Private school my entire life. I'm talking from when I was born mm-hmm. Up until even college. So it wasn't until second grade, I had heard the gospel, and I was like, okay, it makes sense. I know it. And then in third grade, my teacher, Mrs. Laramie, was talking about Peter walking on water and having faith and stepping out in faith, and finally trusting Christ, and asked if there was anybody who hadn't made that decision to meet her in the side room during recess. And so for me, it was okay, I'm ready. And it was more like a business transaction. It was I had known it, I knew it, and so I was very it was very definite, yes, I know that I've sinned, I know that I need God. And mm-hmm. So in October of 1987, I was 8 years old, and then I placed my faith and trust in Christ. And then that's when my world totally got shook upside down. I started having terrible nightmares. Okay. And it was crazy scary. And then 2 days later, my parents sat us down and told us they were filing for divorce. And then I was just this is all, I had associated it with my faith and becoming a Christian and not knowing it had, there was previous history. And so just continued in Christian school. It wasn't until, never went to church, occasionally went to church mm-hmm. here and there. But it wasn't until junior high that I actually started consistently going to church with a friend's family. Yeah. And I would spend the night at her house Saturday night, go to church with them on Sunday. And that's, in junior high, is where I became super grounded in my faith. My mm-hmm. youth pastor wouldn't give me answers. He'd be like, what does the Bible say? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, read it. And I was like, where do I start? And he's like, start in Romans. And so I would mm-hmm. read Romans. And then I'd be like, I didn't find the answer there. And he'd be like, try Luke. And then I'd read all of Luke. And I was like, it's still not there. And he's like, try Job. And I'd read all of Job. And I just kept reading because I wanted answers. Right. So, and it just really grounded my faith all through my 7th, 8th, 9th grade year. Just solidified what I believed and mm-hmm. and knew. And then I went to a Catholic high school where I had opportunities to share my faith. And then I went on to APU for 3 years and was getting a degree in biology, and I was like, that's not what I want to do, but it's easy. That's what my dad wanted me to do, and then ended up just not doing anything, and then did community college for 3 years to figure out what I wanted to do. And then finished up at Cal State San Bernardino with a degree in biochemistry.
Got it. Okay, so that's a different journey than most people take. So you're at APU, then you end up at a community college, and you end up in, you said San Bernardino,
Cal State,
right?
yeah.
Okay, and just almost like a professional student there.
Oh, I love
for a little
school.
while, right?
Yes.
Okay, you're one of the few that I know.
Love it.
That are like that, right? Okay, so you just mentioned that you end up in an area of biochemistry.
Yeah.
All right, and then, if I'm correct, also organic chemistry, is
Yes,
that right?
I really excelled in sciences. And so-
Okay, now when you're saying excel, you're not just being modest there, you actually mean excel. I mean, to a very high level to which most people would not realize. How high a level of excelling are you talking about here?
In the year I took organic chemistry in college, I was number 1 in the state of California. Amongst like all the professors nominated their students, and then I received the top nomination by the American Chemical Society Division of Polymer Education for organic chemistry for the number 1 student in the state of California.
Okay.
And then the following few months, we were tested like in lab, and we were tested on various components. I met with the board and stuff. And I didn't know any of this. Like, I had no idea that this was all for an award.
Okay.
I had to take a national test, and it was our final. And I kept arguing with my professor, like, I'm guaranteed an A in this class. Like, there's no point in me wasting my time studying for this
so
final.
He didn't tell you why
like,
you're taking
no.
it.
And
Okay.
I was like, there's no point. There's
Right.
0 point in me taking this, like, studying for this, because I'm guaranteed an A in this class. Like, there's no point. And he's like, you really need to study for this test. And I was like, I got biochem I got to study for. I got biology. I got calculus 3. Like, who has time to study for a test they're guaranteed an A in?
Right.
I was like, move my other finals and I'll study for this. And he went and met with all the other professors that I had finals on and had them move it so that I could study. I took all those finals a week later so I could study for this test. And I had no idea that it was this big test. But what this test was, it was to nationally rank me with all students in all universities across the entire nation.
Okay.
And so I like to say that I was number 4 in the nation. I say now I'm number 1 on this side of the Mississippi because I was beat out by people from
go.
MIT and like Ivy League schools.
So number 4 in the whole nation. Did he tell you later, maybe why did he not tell you? Was there a particular reason he didn't tell you why you needed to study for that test?
He didn't even tell me until I was, like, I didn't know any of it until I was receiving the award from the university, like, at the university level. Like,
Oh, wow.
till I was walking in, I was definitely not dressed appropriately to receive it. Like, it was because, like, I would have stressed myself out over it. Like, I do well when not under pressure.
Okay.
I do, because I always give my best. And I just remember, like, always doing my best and, like, studying. And people would be like, but you know this, Francine? And I'm like, yeah, but is it my best? Like, God asked me for my best. And they're like, but you don't have to study. And I was like, I don't have to, but is it my best? And so everything I did was always to give my best.
Okay.
And he just knew that if he would have told me, I would have, like...
So he knew his student pretty well. Okay. So here's the thing. So you're number 4 in the entire nation, number 1 on this side of the Mississippi, as you mentioned. I don't know. I don't know many people that in any field could claim that distinction. So how does that play in your head to know that you're that good at something?
It was more important to, like, my family, like, than it was to me. I was just like, okay, cool. Like, it was organic chemistry. It wasn't like I was, like, cool. Like,
Right.
it was just the science. Like, I was going because I wanted to go in biomedical technology, which is my ultimate goal. So it was just like a stepping stone to what I ultimately wanted.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I would excel. And what drove me, though, was because, like, I memorized a lot of the information, and my professor's like, you're not going to be able to memorize it. And I was like, yes, I can. And he's like, no, you're not. And I was able to memorize everything because he told me I couldn't. Like, don't tell me I can't do something, because I'm going to prove it that I can.
So you're that type of personality, which, by the way, when I say that, it should be noted that many of the people that are hugely successful in different areas of life have that type of, some people even call it almost like a chip on the shoulder. It's like, you tell me I can't, and I'll show you I will.
I will always rise to a challenge. Yeah.
Right.
Like if ever challenged, I may not tell you I'm taking on your challenge, but I'll take on the challenge.
Got it. Okay, so on this, you mentioned something. I'm picking up on a little something that you said. Even though you excelled in this very well, you accepted the challenge, and everything you did, you tend to have the personality. If you're going to do something, you're going to do it all the way. Okay, so in that, you excelled in this area. You had goals in this area, but you mentioned it was probably more important to your family than it was to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, my dad, like, I knew in 6th grade I wanted to be a missionary, and my dad's like, "You're too smart. You're too smart to be a missionary. Don't waste your time and your talent on that. You're too smart.
Right.
Like, you're going to be a doctor." And I was like, okay. Like, and I always did everything my dad told me I was going to do. But I didn't necessarily want to be. Like, I knew, like, yeah, it's easy. Like, math, science, that all comes easy. Like, I don't have to, people struggle in school, and I never struggled. Like, it's not something I had to struggle with. And so my parents, like, it was really important to my dad to become a doctor, to become, like, to get my degree in science. Like, he was not, it was like, well, I want to be a missionary. And he's like, you, like, get your degree first and we'll talk about it. Get it in this, we'll talk about it. And so.
So was that almost, did it seem almost like a veiled redirection to just say, well, he's thinking once you get in it this deep and go this far, obviously you're not going to waste that. So, then you're going to utilize it, and you'll be off the track of this other thing that won't bring you that prosperity or success. Is that what you think?
And I fell in love with science. Like, I did. I fell in love with lab. I fell in love with, like, experiments and just discovering the unknown, and finding answers and researching it. Like, I applied for my PhD and got into George Washington University and got a partnership with the NIH, and, like, that was, like, my dream.
Okay.
And like it was, professors were so proud. Like, I had glowing letters of recommendation.
Sure.
And it was a real big deal. And then I was sitting in my, like, apartment on campus one day, and I was like, do you really want to do this for the rest of your life? Spending all day in a lab, talking really with no one, and just experimenting on bacteria, on microorganisms? Like, is that really what you thought you'd be doing when you grow up? At least as a doctor, you would have people interaction.
Sure.
Like, there's not even people, like bacteria. And this is a 6-year to 8-year commitment. Is this really what you want to do?
Now, I would think that it's great that you asked the question and actually responded. We're thinking, we talk about this on this podcast all the time. How many people possibly take a route and God uses that route? I'm sure that everything that you learned in all the disciplines and everything that went into it, he's not wasted. That's kind of a theme in that we're seeing with everyone's life, no matter what they're in. But some people make the mistake, and I don't know if you were tempted here, to make the mistake of almost feeling trapped. It's like, okay, I don't know that this is what I want to do, but I've already put all this effort and this time and all of that, and everyone's expecting me to do this. Everyone's so proud of me for getting here. Was there that battle where it's like, do I make the decision based on what I'm feeling or what everyone expects?
No, there wasn't. It was, I knew that I was not supposed to go.
Okay.
The hard part was sitting there, it was a Saturday, was having to realize I had to tell my dad. And it was just like, this is, like, I'm going to be such a disappointment. Like, he's going to be so upset. They're going to be so mad. Like, everybody, like, even my professors, like, once they found out I turned down, like, my the entrance to George Washington, like, it was this big deal. Like, the school has this award in the front of the building when you walk in, and it's like this huge thing. And to simply be like, that's not what I want out of my life. That's not what I want. And I didn't even know what I wanted at that time, but I knew I didn't want that.
Okay.
And the whole, all that went through my head was, I'm saying no, but now how do I tell others that I'm choosing not to do that?
Right. So maybe you're listening to this podcast and possibly you're at that particular point in your life where you know, like Francine, that there was no doubt in her mind that that wasn't it for her. But possibly you're feeling trapped by having to feel that you have to give in to all the expectations of what everyone else is wanting you to do. Do you regret for a moment making the choices you made?
Not at all. Not at all. With the whole COVID thing coming out, and I have friends who are in labs and stuff like that, and I understand the science behind it, and I'm still able to like talk about it, except there's confidentiality reasons and stuff. I can't hear certain things.
Right.
Like I still get my free, American Chemical Society Journal of Biological Chemistry delivered to me, and I still like love it, and I understand it, but I don't at all like regret it. I don't.
Right.
I wonder, like, would I have been the one that was working on the vaccine? Would I have been the one, like, I was smarter than that person, and I knew that person worked on it. I would have done a much better job.
So there's people working on this stuff that you actually know who they are. I mean, this is in the field. So as people are thinking what level and what field are you looking at, and this is right in the news right now, I mean, that would have been you, probably right in the midst of that.
Yeah, I would told people, like, don't get the Moderna one because those people were stupid. Like, Pfizer, they agreed to hire me out on my undergrad, so they actually know talent. But I have actually people who worked on other one, the Johnson & Johnson.
I won't have to put a disclaimer on this podcast now.
Sorry.
Okay, no, it's fine.
But I simply was like, no, I know it. And,
Okay.
Like, I look at like my peers and I think, and they, we go out and we get together sometimes and they feel bad for me.
They feel bad for you. Okay, so let's talk about what they're feeling bad about. Let's talk about it from just a career decision type of thing, not the heart, not the emotions, not any of the part you've already mentioned. What would your career look like at this point? What would your finances look like at this point?
They would be amazing. Like, so we go to dinner at this really nice restaurant, and they're like, "Don't worry, Francine, we'll cover you." And I'm like, "I have money. Like, I could pay for my." Come on now. Like, we know. I mean, my friends are doctors. My friends are pharmaceutical, farm reps. They're also like making pharmaceuticals.
Sure.
So they all have PhDs, PharmDs.
D's that most of us don't even know what they mean, right?
Yep.
Okay. So financially and lifestyle and all those type of things.
No, they all have houses.
Yeah.
They have 2 or 3 kids.
Yeah.
They're living a very lucrative lifestyle.
Okay. Awesome. So what ends up happening here is instead you just know at that point that's not what you want to do.
Yep.
And so God takes you in a totally different direction.
Yeah.
All right? A direction which I'm suspecting that if at that time when you're sitting there and you're saying, I just know this is not what I'm going to do for the next 30 years. And if I would have walked in the room or someone else would have walked in the room at that point and said, well, let me tell you what you probably will be doing in 10 or 15 years from now or whatever amount of time it was. What would have been your response?
Yeah, right.
There's been like, no way,
Yeah.
right?
No, I would have laughed at you and have been like, no.
Okay, so currently, for those of you who don't know, currently Francine, for instance, does program directing at Victory Ranch Camp out in Moreno Valley, California. Does an excellent job with that, very creative programming, you name it, the kids love it. How long have you been doing that now?
I just completed my 18th year.
18th year. Now, I am old enough to have basically been involved or aware of it for all of those 18 years, including before that. And I can tell you that the difference before it to where it is now, kids have gone more and more, and the program has built up over the years, even despite what's happened the last year or two, because of the quality of that programming and everything that's been put together. But that was probably something you never would have seen yourself doing.
Never.
Right. And then the other thing which you do, of course, is you're very involved in teaching at New Life Christian School, which is a small school. Is not even able to pay what a normal teacher would get. And we're not just talking teaching one subject or one grade level. We're talking, anywhere from kindergarten on up, and sometimes kindergarten part of the day, high school another part of the day, multiple grades other parts of the day, sometimes all at once. And it takes a certain, I would say that God didn't waste your complex mind, because it takes a certain type of mind to even be able to handle that type of multi-directional tasking at once, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And people wonder, how do you transition? How do you know this student is struggling in this and in this book right here, and this student who you saw 2 days ago should be in another book, and you know that they're behind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because my brain makes note of that. I can walk in and I can look at what's being worked on. I could see the answers. I can see what's right and wrong. And as I sit at the kindergarten table and they're taking it, and I was like, okay, she doesn't know this letter, she knows this, and my brain just catalogs it. It just takes it all in.
Right, which is very unique. I mean, obviously everyone has a very powerful brain, but most of us don't know how to use it, or at least not to that degree. And you don't, I say this in a complimentary way, you don't think like the average person. There's different ways that you're putting data and everything together that most of us just don't do. But I think the ironic thing about it is, which you've already mentioned, prior to getting involved with camp, and even after getting involved with camp, if you were to be asked this, okay, and then as far as teaching kindergartners, I mean, there was a point where working with kids would have been probably on your list underneath just about everything else. Wouldn't that have been true?
Oh, absolutely. I said, and I would use the word, hate in the most nicest sense. But I said I hated kids under the age of 9. I wouldn't touch them. I couldn't interact with them. I didn't know how to socialize with them. I didn't, when they would hug me, I'd be like, you're sucking my life out of me. I couldn't, no.
Right. So this is where it comes in to God having an extreme sense of humor. Because I don't know how many of us have seen this in life. Maybe there's that person that you've seen and you don't know them yet, and you're thinking, oh, there's just some, I don't like that person, or there's something about them that I just can't stand. And all of a sudden that person ends up being like a major person in your life, like a real great friend or something like that. And it almost seems like God just has this sense of humor. And when I look at how gifted he's made you in the area of working with kids and children, knowing and being there when you used to say and think those things, it really shows that God just loves doing this.
Oh, in junior high, my English teacher said, Francine, you're going to be a teacher one day. And I was like, no, that is the most stupidest thing I have ever heard. There is no way I'm going to school to go to school. Let alone, even if I ever became a teacher, I will never, ever, ever, ever be a teacher at a private school. Ever. Right. Because private schools don't need Christian teachers.
So, for those of you who've heard never say never, here's a living example of that, because that's exactly what ended up happening. It's almost as if God was hearing every word that you said and said, I'm going to take the same passion that you have to not do it and turn it into the passion that you will have for doing it. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, 100%. It's very humbling going back to my English teacher and telling her she was right,
Right. All right, so after doing the ministry you're doing here, some teaching, actually at that point you were mostly focusing on upper grades in the early part of this, correct?
Yeah.
But even though you were very good at it, and I remember there were many what we would call at-risk students that ended up here because they weren't going to make it anywhere else. This was the last stop. And if they didn't make it here, they were just going to drop out and amount pretty much to nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so you had an impact in several of their lives. But then financial reality was hitting. I mean, you were part-time. There wasn't an availability of funds to make it more than that at that particular point. And so, like so many, you needed to do something. You needed to make a decision in order to survive. So you ended up with a position Something that you thought you would do well, something you've been involved with before. What was that? It was out of Cal State San Bernardino?
It was. I was working for housing as the area coordinator for programming. And so I had done the programming in my undergrad and did really well in that. I was really good at it. It's kind of like what I base like my budget on for camp and stuff, and like that allowed me to really utilize those skills and talents. But no, it came with, 2-bedroom apartment, all food and utilities, all of that covered. Didn't have to worry about like where I'd live, what I'd eat. And then it also came with an amazing pay.
So good pay, good living conditions, food provided, pretty decent situation, something that really wasn't that hard for you to do, right?
Not at all.
Okay. So you could say that, although it wasn't living in the castle, you could say it was a pretty, plush situation.
I didn't have to pay electricity, gas, any utilities.
Right. So it's all good, right? And you were there for how long?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Okay, so what we were just discussing now doesn't seem to add up for most people.
It was the most miserable 6 weeks I ever lived in my entire life. It was like meetings upon meetings upon meetings upon meetings. And then they didn't let you start work until 10 o'clock. I'd get in trouble because I would go into the office at 7 a.m. I may be a little more of a morning person. And then I would get in trouble because I went in too early, but my brain stopped working at 3. So... and they wanted us to work till 6, and no, I was absolutely miserable. I was alone. I couldn't go any more than 15 minutes away from campus. It was just...
So, and that ties right back into why you would have been miserable in the chemistry field, because you're just working with bacteria. And so I guess you found out and figured out even more and more that you were probably more of a people person than you even expected.
Yeah. Yes. I had meet with people, but they were pointless meetings. They weren't something that brought me joy. It was just like, who cares about finances? Who cares about this? That's not life changing. That's not life altering. That's not something that's going to make a difference. It was just meeting for meeting's sake. It was just...
So you're touching on exactly what the theme of this podcast is with Audacious Faith, which is the belief that we actually have the audacity to believe that God actually put us here to actually make a difference, to do something that actually has meaning, not just going through the motions, fulfilling a position, doing something which is right what you were just touching on. But you had left here, it was a situation where it didn't work, now you're in a better financial situation. Most people would say, hey, life is good. It may not be the most meaningful, it may not be my dream job, but it's a job. I'm provided for. Everything is good. And then what happens? Something changes. We had somebody here that part of the reason that we weren't able to pay you enough to survive is because there just wasn't enough funds to go around. We had somebody that had been here for at least 7-8 years. Suddenly, due to circumstances, life changes, you name it, steps out of the position at that particular point. And then
right at the end of 1 week before the end of my 6 week
trial period contract, right? So even though that was unexpected, it's like God knew it all along.
I knew at the end of those 6 weeks I did not want to be their permanent hire. I knew going through their job interview that I did not want that job. Even asked, why do you want this job? I just looked, was blankly I honestly at this point don't. To be honest, I don't.
Well, and by the way, for those of you who are trying to land a job, that's probably not what you want to say.
Don't say it.
But there was honesty there. There was honesty. So it opened up, and then you end up coming back.
Yeah.
Right. Now, some people say that you should never go back. Although in this case, it wasn't really coming back the same way. It was a much more expanded role, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Before, I felt like I was a glorified tutor, but I still impacted lives. And I think that's what still kept pulling on my heart was I just remembered one of my students saying, I was like, Lewis, you're getting A pluses and everything. And I look at your grades and you got all Fs in math. Why? And he said, I never had someone care about me doing as well as you do.
Right.
And that was such a defining, I can't believe someone just said that.
Mm-hmm.
And that just kept playing over, and like, you care.
Right.
You care. Like, just a resounding, like, you care.
Yeah, and you obviously that still sticks with you, and that was probably at least how many years ago?
It was 11.
Yeah, you would know that just like that. I'd be sitting there, let me think, So, but that's how Francine's mind works. So, hey, I have a question which I didn't. I mean, I prepped you on some of the direction that we would be going ahead of time, but here's a question that is kind of relates pretty good to modern day debate out there. All right. You have a very organized mind, a complex mind, a scientific mind, in a sense, all right, where things follow order and things need to fit. Some people believe that faith and science don't fit like that. That to have faith is more of superstition and myth, and those who think intelligently have a scientific mind. You have both. So being a person that thinks orderly like that and scientifically, how does faith fit in? And for you, obviously, it makes sense, right? So.
Oh, 100%, like, hands down. Like, there comes a point where, like, in science, things don't make sense. But yet, like, in my head, it's like, it does. God did it. Like, the answer is God. Like, even, like, when people talk about, like, the whole beginning and how Earth came to being, and the science doesn't support it. And if you go back, like, your physicist, because the math doesn't support it, and how everything's going to chaos, it's saying, everything went from chaos to order back to chaos. And science doesn't support that. And it's like, no, you're wrong. It does. Like, my brain just sees, like, no, it's so orderly. It's so, it fits perfectly. Science, like, the parts that don't fit is because they're asking you to act on an absurd faith, like a faith that doesn't make sense. They want you to believe something that has no, like, basis, whereas, like, God makes sense. It's logical, like.
So in other words, if I'm not really a scientific mind, but if I'm thinking of this correctly, the complexity of things is so much that often it makes no sense if there wasn't a creator of that. Correct?
100%. Like, I remember sitting in biochem class and the teacher going through this whole process of how our body takes in oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide. And she spent 2-3-hour lectures on this. And I raised my hand and I was like, and how long does this process take? Like, she's explaining it, and she was, breathe in. I was like, she's like, breathe out. I was like, she's like, it just all happened. And I said, something that took you 6 hours to explain happened in less than, like, seconds.
And we're supposed to believe somehow that it's just accidentally just worked out that way,
and
right?
the probability and like everything being right-handed and then left-handed sugars to bind with the right-handed amino acids, like the probability of that is like 1 × 10 to the 20th power, and that anything over the 12th power is deemed impossible. Yet it's to the 20th power that it, somehow happened. Like, mathematically, it doesn't make sense. It takes more sense, more faith to believe in the impossible than God.
So you would tell a person then that basically if you're just taking a word at these things that are so, I mean, the probability of winning the lottery almost looks like a sure thing in compared to some of these probabilities they're talking about,
it's like
right?
the whole United States is covered 6 miles with Skittles, and you finding the one yellow Skittle across the entire United States from 6,000 miles up in the air. Like,
yeah, exactly. So really, from your perspective, science and the data that we see seems to scream of the truth of God.
Yeah, but nobody understands the numbers, and it's just like a really big number to people. And I'm like, but mathematically, like.
It makes sense to you. So we'll take it from there. Let's switch gears a little bit. So in addition to all the journey that God has taken you, He also shifted you in the area of health and fitness as well. That became something that's like a passion for you also, right? Now, one thing about Francine that I've known through the years is that Francine has a quality that some people would say is unusual, but it actually serves her very well. And it serves a lot of people well. And that is that when she focuses on something, it becomes a very strong focus on it. And which is really the way that we should be. That's how people actually accomplish something. It's not just a fleeting thought, but it's something that they actually, almost to the point of, some people would say, almost obsess on something, right? So you ended up in an area where was not a previous passion for you.
Oh, yeah.
Which was health and fitness. So where did you find yourself before and then say to now? I mean, maybe give a little background of that.
Well, I used to go to the gym to work out only because I was socializing. Like, it was
Okay.
my social activity. Like, I like people, but I'd be on the elliptical or on the treadmill, and I'd be talking to the person next to me, be like, oh, what brings you here? Like, it was all about relationships. I didn't have any desire to lose weight. I was really, really, really heavy, like, really big. And it was all about socializing for me. And so I started doing Jam Fit because it was fun,
Okay.
and there was people there, and I got to talk to them, I got to build relationships, and I got to see their need for Christ, and
Right.
I was just like, oh, this is a cool, great ministry opportunity. Like, this is amazing. Like, I get to go, I get to talk, and like, not that I, was like, oh, well, I love exercising. It was just the fact that, like, I'd be moving and talking to the person next to me, and that was really it.
So it's mostly just for social purposes, even at that point.
Purely social purposes.
Okay. So you're mentioning, because, I mean, you've had a weight loss journey that, I mean, is very significant at this point. You're able to do things physically that you hadn't been able to do in a very long time, right? And you're still in that journey currently. What's been the length of the journey up to this point, approximately?
June of 2017 was when I first started. And then, like, I was challenged. Someone was like, just give me 100 pounds. See what life would be like, 100 pounds later. And if you don't like it, I hope you gain it back. Like, I had excuses. Like, I didn't want to buy new clothes. Like, the fat fills out my face. And if I lost it, then I would get wrinkly and I'll look old. I had, like, every excuse, like, as to why. But it was a
Right.
challenge. So we go back to the beginning, and I won't tell you I'm taking on your challenge, but I'll take it on. I don't tell you because I don't want to fail. And I'll do everything to, like, not fail.
So 100 pounds, for anybody, it's not going to be overnight. I mean, obviously, if you lose 100 pounds in a month, you're sick at that point. I mean, it just doesn't happen unless something is terribly wrong, right? So obviously, this is something that couldn't be just a fleeting, I'm going to try it for a couple of weeks, okay, I'm over this. I mean, it took something that would require a strong decision, right? So when you took up that challenge, even though you didn't necessarily announce it, do you remember making a strong decision that even if I'm going to gain it all back, I'm going to lose these 100 pounds?
I knew definitively that I was going to try. I wasn't going to tell anyone. I didn't want anybody to notice. I just was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. I don't even know where to start, but I'm going to do it.
So out of curiosity, you said I wasn't going to tell anybody, and you said that before as well. That tends to be, you're determined to do it, but you don't tell anyone. Is there a reason for why you don't publicly declare it?
I don't like to fail. So to me, if I would have said, like, I'm going to do it, and then I didn't do it, then people would know that I
You
failed.
didn't do it. Okay. So some people need that public accountability. That's not necessarily important to you.
No.
You're able to just hold yourself to
Yeah, because, like, I'm a person that if I say I'm going to do something, like, I always say, I don't need a promise. Like, if you say you're going to do it, you're going to do it. Don't promise me that you're going to do it. Just say you're going to do it.
Okay.
Be a person of your word. And so in my head, I had told myself, I'm going to do it. And I didn't tell anybody else at all. I didn't even tell the person who made me the challenge. I mean, people started to notice, 30 pounds in, 50 pounds in, like, hey, you're losing weight. And I would freeze.
Right.
Like, I stopped and I just, like, stood there and I didn't know how to respond because I didn't want people to notice.
Interesting. So, again, take this in a good way. You're the opposite of most people. All right? Because most people that are listening to this podcast right now, they need to be publicly held accountable to do something or they won't do it, okay? Because what most people don't have is exactly what apparently you do have, and that's integrity to yourself, okay? It was important that you kept your word to yourself, where most people they don't care about keeping their word to themselves. It's just if they're held accountable to someone else. So, and they'll want people to see the recognition and that it's actually happening and all that kind of thing, where you're saying that at first when people are noticing, it almost was like, please don't notice.
Oh, yeah. I remember someone saying, like, the person who had made the challenge, like, yeah, just keep going. Don't say anything. Because they knew that it would stop me, like, from moving forward. I would just freeze.
Okay.
I didn't know how.
So why do you, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but have you ever thought about why you didn't want people to notice? Why you didn't want that accountability?
I didn't do it. I honestly didn't do it to lose weight. Like, I started, like, making that decision, and I think what clicked was why I wanted to lose 100 pounds is because I watched my dad die a slow and painful death from diabetes, and I didn't want that life.
Okay.
I knew that's the life, and that's not the death I wanted. Like, I'm content dying. I just didn't want to die slow and painful.
That's what you lived through, right?
Yeah. Like,
okay.
And so, like, that's what overall was my motivation. Yeah, the 100 pounds was what, started me there. I mean, I was on 7 medications. I was, like, couldn't sit up. I couldn't, get out of bed. I had to roll out of bed.
Okay. So there were things that, like, for instance, you're doing now, things that a lot of people would not necessarily think are a big deal. Like recently at Victory Ranch, you were taking a horse ride, things like that. These are things you were not doing.
I couldn't physically do because I exceeded the weight limit. There were things I couldn't physically do.
Okay. So the motivating factor was the challenge of challenging yourself and keeping your word. And then it did kick in about the thought of the health consequences, because you were already having a lot of those health situations, but you were younger and able to withstand it at this point, right? Okay. So, for instance, how many medications do you take now?
0.
All right. How many high levels do you have now?
0. I have perfect, like, it's all my blood work, my blood panels, amazing. My doctor said, like, your triglyceride, your panel, your cholesterol panels, like, impeccable. Whatever you're doing, bottle it and sell it, because
there you go.
Like, that is amazing.
So people, I'm sure, because this is a big thing that a lot of people are concerned about, their health, exercise, they're into fitness, maybe they're doing stuff and it isn't working, they're not getting the results. They start, they stop. Maybe 1 or 2 things that have just been key for you.
I didn't do anything drastic. Like, I remember starting with a plate of food and just taking 2 spoonfuls off my plate. Like, I didn't change what I was eating at the time. I just took 2 spoonfuls off. And did that keep me from going back from seconds? No. I still went back for seconds, but I still take off those 2 spoonfuls the second time.
Got it.
Like,
okay.
that was it. I didn't change anything drastic. And then I started tracking what I was eating, because I noticed when I was vegan for a year, I didn't get migraines. So I knew there was something that was either in meat or in the dairy that gave me migraines.
Okay.
And then I started, like, tracking everything I ate, so I'd learn what it was and how my body reacted and responded to things.
Got it. Okay, so migraines obviously are debilitating for people that have those. So it was much better quality of life to not be. I mean, how often were you getting them? Daily
migraines. Like, there was not a day I did not have a migraine, and I was taking 2 Excedrin migraines, 3 ibuprofen every 4 hours, 4 to 6 hours.
Which is a liver nightmare if you're familiar.
No, because one's metabolized in the kidney and the other's metabolized in the liver.
And only you would know that. Okay. But
you get a synergistic effect when you take the 2, but...
Exactly. Okay. Well, some people are at home are now going to mix them up together. But again, another disclaimer. But here's the thing. So now life is different. You're not taking those.
No, not at all.
Okay. You're not taking the diabetes medication, the different medications you were taking. There's a point where it shifted, I'm assuming, from I'm doing this because I told myself I was going to do it, to where you actually enjoy doing it.
Oh, I love I love what I do. I always say, like, if you don't love it, you're not going to keep doing it.
Right.
I love the food I make. Like, I cook my own food. I have to change it up because I can't do the same boring, chicken, vegetables. Like, I can't.
Right.
Like, I have to do something different. I love the exercise plan or program that I'm in. Like, it's fun and engaging, and
Right.
I get to interact with people still. So
Exactly. So now putting that into perspective, we're going to tie everything together that we've talked about in this interview. All right. So you're going towards, you want to be a missionary. You're dissuaded against that. You end up being in chemistry, biochemistry, organic chemistry. You get to the top of the field. You're basically almost like Martin Luther King saying you're at the mountaintop and you can see it. Okay. And you realize, I don't want it. Okay. This is not what I want to do. All right, because no purpose. As far as you wanted the interaction, you wanted the human interaction, you wanted all of that. You end up in teaching, you end up in camp ministry, you end up in this. It gets taken away. You go out to Cal San Bernardino again, just not getting the purpose, not enough interaction, you name it. So you're back in this. Now you're doing this, which is great for you. You're healthier, you feel better. But I've sensed, from what I've seen, where, again, it's now taking a greater purpose. It's almost as if there's a reason that you've gone through it to be able to inspire others, correct?
Oh, absolutely. 100. It's opened up a platform that I don't think I would have ever had. And the fact that I continue on this journey, because I've lost the 100 pounds. I've lost more than 150 pounds. And I just keep, I tore my lateral and medial meniscuses on one knee and on the other. And so, like, yet it didn't slow me down or say, like, oh, I got to give up or I can't do this anymore. But just, like, I absolutely love the people and the purpose that I, like, when I post something, people comment and people ask questions, and it gives me the opportunity to share just the journey and who I am and the faith that I have with people I would have never even had that opportunity to.
So God opens up possibilities through all of these various aspects of your life, of what he's done. And you should take note if you're out there, because Francine just mentioned something. She tears, what was it again?
My lateral and medial meniscus.
And so we're talking both.
Both, yeah.
In both, right? And a lot of people will go, oh, it's a sign. Okay, I'm done. I'm not going to fight through the pain and continue to possibly do, it doesn't take much to dissuade people off. Here's a curious question that comes to my mind. Let's say that you went to bed tonight, and I know this is crazy, but let's say you woke up tomorrow and you were 100 and something pounds heavier, and you realized this was all something you dreamt of. But you knew the process and the journey of how to do it. But now you're set back 100 and something pounds, but you know what you got to do. Would you do it?
Absolutely. I have enjoyed this entire journey the entire time. Like, I am like, wow, I've never been this weight before. Like, every time I go less, it's like, I may have saw it past, I never even saw it on the scale. The scale at my house only went up to 230 pounds. And so once I passed 230, like, I never saw anything on the scale ever. And I've loved the process. Like, I've never felt like this is work. This is difficult. It's like fun. It's enjoyable. It's like, oh, I can put my shoe on without, like, I can bring my foot up to my thing. Like, all these things that I could do that I've never been able to do before.
Sure.
Or, like, I can't even, it's incredible just what like the joy that it gives me. So yeah, being set back 100 pounds, it's like, okay, like, I enjoyed the process the entire time. So.
And knowing the process, you now know the code. You now know you could do it if you know how to do it. Isn't it true that once somebody learns how to do something that they've never been able to do, they should be able to do it again and hopefully repeat it in others if they can teach them how to take the same steps?
Yeah.
right? Okay. So what would you say, let's sum up, because we're going to start wrapping up, but are there a couple of lessons through your life so far at this point that really stand out to you then that you just want to maybe share with others?
Well, my life verse is Acts 20:24, which talks about how my life means nothing. It's all about testifying to the gospel of Christ.
Okay.
And I wouldn't necessarily, being in a lab, would I be able to have done that? That became my life verse at 18.
Mm-hmm.
And would I have been able to do that? Maybe on weekends,
Right.
but would I have had people to interact with? But here on the daily, in the lives of my kindergartners and their parents, and the lives of the students, not just kindergarten, because I teach more grades than just that, but to impact their lives and to have those conversations and to build those relationships and to see that I'm not just impacting one person, but I'm impacting an entire family. Mm-hmm. And the life that I live and the Christian faith that I have and the walk and the characteristics that I model and I demonstrate to my students, at graduation speeches and at different times, and students write letters and they talk about mm-hmm. the most influential person in their life, and mm-hmm. when they choose me, it's like, God, I'm that missionary I wanted to be in
Sure.
6th grade.
Right.
Like, I'm living the life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what I thought it was going to be,
mm-hmm.
but it's more than
Yeah.
I could have ever dreamt
Right.
it would be. And financially, does it all match up and do it? But I'm never without want. Like, all my needs have always been met. Like, mm-hmm. I am blessed beyond measure. Mm-hmm. And it's incredible because I could have never dreamt it, never planned it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So there's a perfect example of how God heard your prayer back then and took you, what some people would think is, well, this doesn't seem to make sense. This doesn't seem to make sense. But he could see that, and we're not at the end of the maze yet. Obviously, there's more twists and turns and directions. But God has an aerial view that we can't see as we're navigating through the twists and turns in the walls, right? So he sees the destinations, and I'm sure there's much, much more. So let's finish with this. There's a person out there that's going to be listening to this either now or in the future. It's going to be up there for a long time. And God is going to be giving them opportunity to take a step of faith. And maybe there's going to be family or friends or different people that are saying, no, wait a minute, that's not what... Don't just follow your heart. That doesn't make sense. What would you want to tell them at this point?
I would say follow God. Don't ever go against what God has designed for you. It is beyond rewarding to do what He has planned for you. It's His perfect plan, and it's more than you could ever dream or you could even fathom, or it's beyond the limits your brain can even comprehend. It's out of this world, literally.
Awesome. Well, I don't know about you, but I've enjoyed this conversation. Even though I knew you pretty well, I learned much more, and I'm sure that it's been an inspiration to people that are listening today. We encourage you to take the audacious steps of faith, because in so doing, God will take you places beyond what you could even imagine. That's it for this episode, and we'll see you next time. God bless.